Grade 12 Economics. Good afternoon. It's Mr. Mhlongo here with you today on Economics Live lesson. Our lesson is on the main topic, economic pursuits. And then it's mainly focusing on a revision, as we believe that these topics have been covered in all schools that are doing grade 12. So under this main topic, we have the topic protectionism and free trade, where we'll be bringing in some section B questions, the most, including section C as an example of an essay. And then we also have economic and social indicators. There will also be a part of economic growth and development. So please join me. Let's see what we have for you in the pocket. The following are the lesson objective that will be achieved during the course of this lesson. After this revision lesson, you will be able to approach some question papers, basically using using a previous question papers to get to know and to be very close and be used to the structure of the question. So like I was saying, here we show the question paper structure, basically using previous question papers. So with this lesson, you will be able to be familiar with the way in which the examination will be, and also this lesson will train you to approach different questions from section B to section C. So let's see. Then, like I've said, we'll be trained to approach various question papers, various sections in the question paper, under basically economic pursuit, which is a part of your question 1, the question 3, the part of question 4, as well as question 6. So it brings forward examples of questions from lower order, middle order, and higher order from previous question papers. So it is believed that you are already well informed about all topics under economic pursuit, which include the protectionism and free trade, economic growth and development, industrial development or regional development, as well as economic and social indicators that have been taught. Right now, we are just making you familiar with the questioning order and the structure. The following are the important dates for you for this term. Remember, there's a preparatory examination going on already in Gauteng. So as for paper 1, we'll be writing paper 1 for economics on the 14th of September. And then paper 2 will be reaching on the 21st of September 2023. We just have to be prepared for this examination. And then the other important date, which is the last date for you, or the last date for you as you will be doing economics for this year, that's the NSC final examination 2023. On the 31st of October, we're writing paper 1, which will be in the first session in the morning. And then on the 7th of November 2023, we'll be writing your economics paper 2, which will be at 2 o'clock. It is very important for you to know these dates because you need to start planning for your study. As you plan your study, it is very important to note also which are the subjects that are followed by economics. For instance, you have your paper 2 that is simply coming after maths and maths lit and other, as well as technical maths. So that is a very important information you need to note as you'll be preparing for your examination. So this is the layout of our content and question papers. So as for paper 1, since we are in paper 1 today, obviously we have macroeconomics that consists of 4 topics, which is the circular flow, business cycles, public sector, as well as the foreign exchange market. Remember, these topics will be in your question 1, section B, which is question 2, also as a part of question 4, as well as question 5 in section C. And then the economic pursuit of the day. Here we have the protectionism and free trade that will be covered today, also in a form of revision. Economic growth and development, a part of it will also be covered. Industrial development policies, a part of questions also will be coming from this topic in this lesson, as well as economic and social indicators, which is having most of questions also from here. So this part is found in question 1, which is section A. In section B, it will be question 3. It will be a part of question 4 also. Remember, question 4 mixes both macro and economic pursuit. And then as well as in your section C, you will be coming across one of essays from these topics in question number 6. So it is very important for you to know the layout and the structure of your question paper so that you can prepare yourself accordingly. You know your strength, you know your most focused areas, you know where you get the most of mark, between what you call macroeconomics as well as economic pursuits. So you need to get your training going on so that you will end up knowing exactly in which section are you going to dominate if we compare macroeconomics as well as economic pursuits. On the other side, we have our paper 2, which is not the case today, but I will go through it. We have microeconomics, which consists of 3 topics, namely perfect market, imperfect market, as well as the market failure. These are found in your section A, question 1, section B, question 2, as well as a part of question 4. Then the essay will be in question 5. And then economic issues that were covered last week. We talk about the inflation, tourism, as well as environmental sustainability. These topics will be found in your paper 2 in section A, question 1, section B, the question 3, and the part of question 4 also, as well as your section C as an essay. It is very important that you know in question 2, which topics will you come across. There is no way that they will change. Those topics will remain there. As for in paper 1 macroeconomics, that will be your question 2 and also a part of question 4. Obviously, question 1 as well as your section C, which is question 5. You will never find that pursuit is in question 5. No, macro will always be in question 5 in this case, and then pursuit will always be in question 6 in the section C. Also, question 2 will be macroeconomics. Question 4 will be the mixture of macroeconomics as well as economic pursuit. So ensure that as you prepare for your examination, you know exactly what you are going through and how are you going to choose. You know your strength, you know your dominance. So this is section B, short questions here. This is the lower order where you mention or name. Mention any 2 methods of export promotion. We talk about export subsidies and also incentives. Remember, if we talk about the export promotion, we refer to the policy by the government aiming at promoting locally produced goods and services into the global market. The main aim is to ensure that local firms are able to produce more goods and services for foreign markets, not mainly for local markets. So within the export promotion, there are some methods or approaches that are used. In there, we talk about subsidies, which can be direct or indirect. If we talk about direct subsidies, we refer to cash grant that is given by the government to local exporting businesses, which is aiming at supporting them to produce more goods and services at the lower cost. And then we talk about indirect subsidies that do not include the direct cash. So we call them incentives. In this case, we talk about those benefits that are given by the government to locally exporting businesses with the aim of supporting them to produce more goods and services for the global market. As these incentives are given to these businesses, they are able to produce more goods and services by spending less, because remember, if we talk of incentive, it's not the cash given to businesses, but these are benefits that are given by the government to these businesses in a form of maybe it can be tax benefits such as tax incentives, tax rebates and tax exemptions, tax refunds. We talk about the the cheap transportation or cheap flights, low cost storage, good publicity or advertising and marketing, etc. So those are strategies to ensure that local businesses are able to produce more goods and services and sell them in the foreign market without spending more on the cost of the production. How does export promotion affect the balance of payments of a country? Remember, if we promote exports, you have to be able to link now. If there is an export promotion policy, that will mean there will be high volume of locally produced goods and services sold in the foreign market. That will mean our export volume will be increasing. So as the government promote exports, there will be high volume of exports flowing out of the country, which will then mean our export might be increasing faster than import. So for that sake, that can lead to, if exports are more than imports, that can lead to the trade surplus or reduced trade deficit. So if ever the government is involved on supporting local businesses through export promotion, there will be high volume of exports that might be increasing faster than the volume of imports, leading to maybe the trade surplus or reduced trade deficit, which will be affecting the balance of payment positively in there, because there will be more of the inflow of the currency as for export earnings. Export promotion increase the volume of exports, resulting to high inflow of foreign currencies. If export increase further than import, the trade deficit on the balance of payment will be reduced, or we can experience the trade surplus. Why can export promotion be seen as a disadvantage to local industries? So now let's look. If we promote exports, the main thing that comes into your mind, our local firms are able to produce more goods and services and sell into the foreign market, which benefit them as a part of the advantage. So the question now is, how does export promotion be seen as a disadvantage to local industries? What can be a disadvantage to local industries as for export promotion? Remember that if our goods from South Africa are sold abroad and then also are supported through export promotion policy, local businesses find it very cheap to produce. And then as they charge prices for these exports into foreign markets, they charge relatively lower prices, which will be known as distorted prices. Export promotion distort prices. They don't give the true reflection of the cost of the production for the product, because the support given by the government, especially under incentive, is not retrieved by businesses to say how much was that. So it is not added on the cost of production by businesses. Therefore, prices tend to be distorted. As these goods appear more cheap abroad or in the foreign market, these goods can be seen as a product of dumping. For that sake, foreign businesses can intervene by retaliating, or foreign countries can retaliate by imposing more tariffs on South African export to make them relatively expensive. So that's a part of the disadvantage. Also, with this policy of the export promotion, if ever the government can withdraw or remove its financial support or incentive to these exporting local businesses, that can lead to them not being very much competitive in the open market. If we talk about the open market, we refer to the market where there is no government intervention. So this means if the government can simply withdraw its support to these exporting businesses, these businesses cannot afford to stand on their own in the open market where there is no government intervention, resulting to them shutting down or exiting the foreign or global market. Industries benefiting through export promotion policy might not be able to compete in an open market when subsidies and incentives are removed. That's why we say export promotion can also be seen as a disadvantage to local business, because they become more dependent on the government support. So without the government support, they cannot be able to stand on their own, because the government has been giving them more financial aid and financial support or non-financial incentive for them to produce more goods and services and be more competitive in the global market. So they might not be able to sustain their businesses without the government support. The remove of government support may cause the businesses to exit the international market, so they cannot be able to stand on their own in the foreign market, resulting to them exiting. What impact does export promotion have on export prices? So, like I mentioned before, if ever there's an export promotion policy, the government support these businesses through either financial aid or non-financial aid that will lead to them spending less to produce or to to advertise or to transport their goods and services. So in that case, as businesses charge prices for these goods and services, they will be charging price based on the cost of the production, without knowing the amount that was basically spent by the government, which include both direct and indirect subsidies on their support. So for that sake, prices will be lower and they will be distorted. Export promotion distort prices. Goods are sold at the lowest price, resulting to them being seen as dumping in foreign countries. So our goods will be cheap, and they will be seen as dumping because these prices will be very, very low abroad compared to those other goods they are competing with abroad. So they can then be seen as products of dumping. Prices of goods are not the true reflection of the production cost, because government support is not considered when pricing the products. How can the foreign countries react to high volume of cheap imports from South Africa? So now the question is, if ever South African businesses are selling their goods in relatively lower prices abroad, our exports are becoming cheap abroad, which, remember, our export, as we export, we call them export, but they receive them as import. If our goods are relatively cheap abroad, then how will the foreign countries react? We know that if our goods are relatively cheap in the foreign market, they will try to protect their local industries against our cheap imports, resulting to them retaliating by imposing more tariffs and high quotas on our export in those countries. Foreign countries can retaliate by imposing high tariffs on South African exports to make them expensive. South African export can be seen as dumping, resulting to total bans as they make foreign competitors vulnerable. Remember that as our goods are becoming more cheap in the foreign market, the foreign competitors that are selling goods selling the similar goods that are not subsidized by their government will be selling those goods at the higher cost. So if our goods are are sold at the lower cost, that will be driving out those foreign competitors out of the market. Therefore, their government will intervene to protect them by imposing more tariffs and high import restrictions on those goods and services, so that foreign consumers can neglect goods from South Africa and demand their locally produced goods and services. So answers to these questions must be in full sentences. Remember, you don't simply listen in this part of the questioning order. You have to explain in the full sentence, because we are dealing with the question that goes with how, why, what, etc. So in this case, you must explain. You don't just mention or list. And some of you, if we say what impact will, you simply say negative. There is no answer for that. You must explain whatever impact we are responding on. And then this is the data response, which is a part of our section B also. This is a Megley order. So we are still on the export promotion. So export promotion in South Africa, this is the extract. Internationalization has required companies to look outside their domestic markets and utilize opportunities internationally. Companies are engaging in export activities to pursue greater market share and growth in profits. Countries also benefit from increased export by earning more foreign exchange and creating more employment opportunities. Therefore, governments and other private entities are providing export promotion programs which are designed to encourage companies to promote the exports and goods and services in foreign market. The source is Wikipedia. So this is all about export promotion. Remember, as South Africa is promoting exports, South Africa as a country will be able to benefit from this, because there will be more export earnings, there will be more jobs being created for the local labor force, leading to businesses earning more profits abroad and also being able to grow effectively in the global market and be very much competitive, because they are being supported by the government. So the scenario is all about that. So I've underlined some of the basic points in there that might be questioned, and they might be your answers in the lower order, where you have to list or identify. Let's look at questions. Mention the department responsible for export promotion in South Africa. So it is not in there. Remember, these kinds of the questions can either be there or cannot be there. So Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. This is the department that is responsible for what we call export promotion in South Africa. We call this one a DTIC. Identify benefits for local firms on the export promotion. So how do our local firms benefit from the export promotion? They pursue greater market share and growth in profits. Define the term export promotion. Export promotion is the strategy to encourage local products to foreign market through subsidies and incentives. So that's when the government gives subsidy and incentive to local businesses to produce more goods and services for the foreign or international markets. Because remember, foreign markets are bigger than local markets. So if our goods are promoted to the foreign markets, they can be able to grow faster due to the fact that foreign markets are relatively bigger as compared to local markets. And then the data response continues. What impact does high demand for export has on labor market? So remember, if ever there is high demand for export, that will mean our local firms that are exporting goods will demand more labor force or more workers. As they demand more workers, that will increase employment opportunities and decrease the unemployment. The increase in demand for export increase the demand for labor, resulting to increase in employment and labor participation. How can taxation be used as a measure to promote exports? So remember, export taxation. We have some concepts that are dealt with under export promotion. We talk about the tax rebate, we talk about the tax exemption, and then tax rebate also goes with refund on import tariffs. Our local businesses that are supported through export promotion are sometimes refunded. Remember, as they export, they pay the import tariffs in the foreign countries. So the government take an initiative or responsibility to refund them on those tariffs that were paid when they were exporting their goods and services. And then tax exemption. Some businesses are given tax concessions whereby they're excluded from paying a certain percentage of tax. For instance, maybe the business have to pay 28% on its revenues, but the business will then be obliged to pay only maybe 15% instead of 28%. So there's a certain exemption of 13%. Tax benefits such as tax exemption or tax concessions are offered to exporting business to ease their cost burden and increase the productivity. Remember, if ever there's a tax concession on the business will be able to take that amount that was supposed to be paid for tax and use it to further the production purposes. So that will be reducing the cost of production if ever businesses are getting tax concessions or tax exemptions. Refunds on import tariffs to export promotion beneficiaries are given back as a part of rebate to support them to increase their production to foreign markets. If ever businesses are giving refunds on their tariff that they've paid as they export their goods, those refunds can be used also to further the production purposes, and that will increase the production of goods and services. Another data response is the export and import with Europe. So we talk about exports to Europe, top 5 product exports to Europe. We talk about in there vehicles, aircraft and vessels, and then we talk about the precious metal, we talk about mineral products, and then we talk about the products, iron, steel, and then vegetables. These are goods that are exported basically from South Africa to Europe. And then the main imports, we talk about machinery and equipment, the chemicals, equipment, components, and then vehicles, aircraft and vessels, as well as plastics and rubber. So the source is investing.com. So it is very important for you, as we have analyzed this information, you know which are the main exported products and which one is the main exported product. If you can check, vehicles, aircraft and vessels are the main exported, and then the lowest are vegetables. The main imported are the machinery, and then the lowest is plastic and rubber. So it is very important for you to keep that basic information as you go to check on your questions. Mention the organization that promotes fair trade between world countries. It is not in there, so it is very important for you to keep this information in your mind because it's a part of the lower order. So in this case, we talk about the World Trade Organization, WTO. Identify the highest product exported to Europe. Then we talk about vehicles, aircraft, and vessels. And then define the term export direct subsidies. So in this case, we talk about the financial aid given given to local exporting businesses to increase the volume of local goods in foreign markets. So if it's a direct subsidy, that's a cash grant given directly by the government to businesses to improve their production process and produce more goods for the foreign markets. We continue with the data response. How can high export prices affect terms of trade? Remember, now we are linking export promotion, the export prices, the terms of trade. If ever our exports are becoming relatively expensive abroad, maybe caused by the appreciation of the currency, that can lead to the country earning more terms of trade in the short run, especially if our exported goods maybe are relatively inelastic. If our goods are relatively inelastic, meaning they are not easily replaceable abroad, that will mean our terms of trade will increase in both short and long run because our goods are not easily replaceable. They don't have perfect substitutes abroad. But if our goods are relatively elastic, that will mean our goods are easily replaceable. So in the short run, our terms of trade as a country will be increasing abroad. But in the long run, our terms of trade will be declining because foreign consumers will be able to find alternating products that will be used to replace South African expensive goods and services. High export prices increase the terms of trade in the short run depending on elasticity of demand for exported goods and services. If exports are relatively elastic, terms of trade decrease in the long run since local exports has substitute in the foreign market. Like I've mentioned, if our goods are relatively elastic, that will mean they have perfect substitutes abroad. Therefore, foreign consumers will end up not demanding more of South African expensive exports and demand their locally produced goods because they might be relatively cheap compared to South African exports. How does high export volumes affect the growth of the economy? Now, you check if ever exports are increasing, and then how will that affect the economy? Remember, if ever there's a high volume of export, meaning more goods are produced for the foreign market, they are produced and sold abroad, that will lead to even more GDP of the country, resulting to more economic growth. So it will lead to increase or improvement of South African economic growth, since there will be a greater production or productivity and also more real GDP and more economic growth. The increase in export increases local production, which increases the demand for labor. So as there will be more demand for labor, there will be more income. With more income available, there will be greater demand for goods and services, encouraging even local firms to produce more goods because the demand will be increasing. High productivity increases the country's GDP and economic growth. So if there is high level of productivity, there will be high level of real GDP, and also there will be high level of economic growth. Export earnings increase national income and the level of investments. So if we earn more income abroad as export earnings, there will be high level of national income, resulting to high level of investments in the economy or injection into the economy, resulting to a further growth in the economy of the country. And then the lower order mentioned two forms of import substitution. So there are two forms in this case. We talk about the forced import substitution, and then we talk about what we call voluntarily import substitution. So if the import substitution is forced, that simply means the country is not allowed to trade with other world countries. The country has been either sanctioned or banned from trading with other world countries. So like in South Africa, we once faced the part of the forced import substitution during the bad political climate, whereby the certain company was formed under the forced import substitution. In there, we talk about the Armscor that was formed, which is the Denel company that you know as a part of our SOEs. It was formed to ensure that the country is well protected because it was unable then to trade effectively with other world countries due to sanctions that were in place or that were imposed against South Africa. Voluntarily, this is when a country decides on its own will to replace former imported goods and services with the locally produced goods and services so that it can reduce international dependency. So in this kind of the import substitution, we talk about the formation of the company known as ISCO. South Africa decided to be very much independent on the production of steel. Then it formed what we call the ISCO company to ensure that it is able to produce its own steel instead of depending on other world countries. So these are two forms of import substitution. Mention any two types of import tariffs. So here is the list. We talk about the specific import tariffs. We talk about ad valorem tax. We talk about the composite import tariffs. If we talk of the specific, we refer to the kind of a tariff whereby it is imposed on a product per unit. That one is specific. The ad valorem tax or import tariff is a tariff that is imposed on the product based on its value. And then the composite is the combination of both what we call the specific import tariff as well as the ad valorem tariff. Mention two types of import quotas. So also in this case, we have two forms that will be mentioned. We talk about the general import quotas, and then we also have discriminatory import quotas. If we talk of general import quotas, we refer to a situation whereby the government will simply impose import quotas or import limits that are equal across different world countries or across different importers. But if it's discriminatory, that's when the government is choosing now to say maybe one country will be importing maybe 50 kg of a particular product, while other countries will be allowed to import more than maybe 100 kgs. So in that case, there's a discrimination in place because countries are not treated the same in terms of importing that particular product. Then we call that one discriminatory import quota. And then we continue. How does import substitution affect international relations? So remember, the import substitution is whereby the country decides to replace the former imported goods and services with the locally produced goods and services. So the main aim is to encourage local firms to produce more of the particular product, and also encouraging local consumers to demand the locally produced goods and services instead of demanding the import. So if imports are being restricted through import substitution policy, that will be blocking the entry of imports in high volumes, or as they enter the country, they will be relatively expensive because import tariffs will be high, import quotas will be imposed, resulting to the prices for imports becoming relatively high or expensive. So if ever the country is using the import substitution policy, that can compromise international relations, because even foreign countries can intervene by retaliating, as they will be imposing more tariffs and more restrictions on South African exported goods and services. Import substitution affects international relations negatively, as it may result to trade war between world countries. So if we talk about the trade war in this section, we refer to a situation whereby countries find themselves fighting using tariffs and quotas, or using import restrictions against each other, because they have just, one country have just decided to impose tariffs on one another's product. For instance, we have noticed, or we saw China fighting with the USA over import tariffs. So the US imposed more tariffs on imports from China, and that led to China retaliating by imposing more tariffs also on US products. That was a trade war. Countries retaliate by imposing more tariffs, which can even result in trade embargoes, sanctions, or total bans. So some can decide even to ban some goods from those other countries that are imposing more tariffs on them, because of what? Because of these tariffs that have been imposed on their products. So that's a trade war. Why is it, why is import substitution difficult to implement by African countries? Remember, African countries are mostly developing countries. So they are lacking some technical resources as well as machinery. So it will be difficult for them to impose import substitution in general products, because they are unable to produce some of the goods and services. They're still very much dependent. So it is uneasy for them to intervene by imposing or implementing the import substitution, because they are still very much dependent in foreign countries. Hence, we are the great importers. African countries are less industrialized. They depend more on primary sector. They lack technical resources and machinery necessary to transform their natural resources. So if ever they intervene by imposing import substitution policy in those other countries, that will lead to them maybe being sanctioned, or their goods will be banned, or they will not be able to get some goods from these other countries, because they have decided to impose tariffs, high tariffs on their imports as they come into South Africa. So they decide not to do that very much, because they are unable to stand on their own. They are dependent mostly on those other countries for machinery and equipment to transform their resources to final goods and services. They are also dependent mostly on the primary sector or natural resources, for which they don't have relevant equipment to transform them into finished goods. There's a great demand for goods in Africa, while supply constraint exists, which increase the level of imports for even basic foodstuff. We know that we have less productivity in Africa. Our firms or business are less industrialized. For that sake, they produce and supply relatively less goods and services. So, for the market to be able to, to satisfy needs of consumers, and then there will be imports flowing into the country to cover for those basic needs that are needed by consumers in African countries. So they cannot simply impose substitution strictly, because they are less industrialized. They are not producing as much as possible goods and services based on what is demanded. So we are faced by supply constraints, which lead to the increase in volume of imports from other world countries, which include even finished goods. Why do developed countries favor the idea of free trade? Remember, now we talk about the developed countries, the countries that are well industrialized, as well as the free trade. If we talk about the free trade, we refer to the trade policy that does not include trade barriers and trade restrictions. Countries or businesses are free to export and import goods and services without having to pay any tariffs. There are no restrictions that are in place to prevent the entry of imports of goods and services. So developed countries are well industrialized. They produce more goods and services, and also they produce at the lower cost per unit, which allow them to have economies of scale. For that sake, they will always find it easy to import their goods into South African economy. As their goods are flowing into South African economy, they will be benefiting the most because their goods will be relatively cheap. As these goods are becoming relatively cheap in South Africa due to the lower cost of production, that will be leading to local consumers demanding cheap imports and compromising the locally produced goods and services. Remember, these businesses that are known as multinational industries from developed countries are faced by economies of scale, meaning they produce more goods and services at the lower cost per unit and sell them at the lower cost, which is not the case in developing countries, because developing countries are producing at the diseconomies of scale. They produce at the higher cost per unit and sell at the higher cost per unit. So they are not favored by the free trade, because as the free trade occur in a particular country, that will lead to the more inflow of finished goods from foreign countries, resulting to local consumers demanding cheap imports and compromising the locally produced goods and services, which will be resulting our local firms exiting the market. Free trade increases competition, and this encourages innovation, especially in developed countries that have the know-how. So remember, developed countries are well informed about, they know how to do and what to do. If ever they have to be involved in the free trade, they will have a pure strategy on how to dominate the foreign markets, other than developing countries that are mainly dependent on natural resources that are even having strategic value, and they are less subsidized by our local governments. Developed countries have the free access to resources worldwide needed for mass production in expanded markets. So we know that developed countries are well informed. They can access resources anywhere and easily, which will lead to them producing more goods and services, which is known as a part of the mass production, resulting to what we call the economies of scale. Developed countries benefit from trade agreements with poor countries. Remember, they manipulate developing countries because they ensure that as they agree on the trade agreement, they become the most beneficiaries because they mostly focus on finished goods and services as well as technology, while developing countries are mainly focusing on exporting natural resources that are sold at the lowest possible value abroad. And also remember, developing countries are faced by weak currencies compared to developed nations. Free trade reduces regulation on the production of labor, environment, and the consumers. Free trade increase power of multinationals. So if there is a free trade, the multinational industries will be dominant because their strength will be well gained and will be used due to the fact that they produce at the economies of scale, they produce at the possible lower cost per unit, large quantity, and sell at the lower cost, which will always favor them in that case than developing countries. We continue. How can SMMEs, small, micro, and medium enterprises, support economic growth? We know that if ever the government focus on supporting the small and micro and medium enterprises, that will lead to greater job opportunities created in those areas, resulting to more people earning income and demanding even more on goods and services. There will be an increase in local production within the country because SMMEs are mainly focused on producing locally, and then also that might lead to increase in exports to foreign countries, earning more foreign currencies. So increasing productive capacity and manufacturing. So if ever the government focus on supporting SMMEs, there will be greater level of manufacturing sector in the economy, creating employment opportunities for structurally unemployed people. So people will be getting jobs and be able to earn income and demand more goods and services, which will be encouraging local firms to produce even more goods and services. Increasing competition in the economy. So if SMMEs are well supported within the economy, there will be a high level of competition. So that's a part of what we call the supply side policies, whereby there are more businesses that are introduced in the economy, resulting to high level of competition, high level of productivity, and high level of employment opportunities, resulting to high level of innovation and also lower prices prevailing for domestic consumers. Increasing opportunities for exports by local businesses. Like I've mentioned, local businesses will be able to produce more goods, and also some of the goods can be sold abroad or in foreign markets. Increased entrepreneurial skills and will lead to high production and investment. We know that if SMMEs are in place, they will be receiving ongoing training from the government in a part of NSDS and skill development strategy, which will be leading to improvement of entrepreneurs in South Africa also, as they get to be improved also through free advisory schemes and business intelligence. They will be able to produce more goods and services and produce efficiently. That will also increase the high level of investments in a country's economy. And then we'll continue. How can indirect subsidies benefit the export producer? In this case, we talk about what does not include the direct cash given by the government to support export, but it mainly includes the support that can be a non-financial support given by the government to ensure that businesses are benefiting, they are not producing at the higher cost. The export producer can benefit by receiving refunds on import tariff tax or tax rebates and tax concessions. So the government can intervene by refunding them or also giving them some exemptions on taxes. And then production costs will decrease, resulting to increased profit. So the cost of production by our exporters will be lowered, resulting to high profits being earned by these businesses. Increased ability to compete in foreign markets or increased exports. Local businesses can be able to compete to be very much competitive abroad due to the fact that they are getting the support from the government. For instance, the government get to intervene through, intervene by ensuring that these businesses are having good publicity. The government can get some authorities to do marketing and advertising for these businesses abroad, resulting to them having to be only being responsible to sell their goods abroad because the government has done the market research on their behalf, has done advertising for them. Their responsibility is only to sell goods and services. Also, the low cost storage, remember, as goods are being transported, they should be stored somewhere. So as they're stored, the government ensure that these businesses get the lowest possible cost storage so that they will be able to take other funds and further their production process. Also, the transportation, the low cost storage, the low transportation or cheap price. These businesses have to transport their goods from South Africa to foreign countries. The government tries to discount them so that they will be transporting their goods at the lowest possible cost, keeping that room for them to take that money that was supposed to be used to transport to further the production process. Why should South Africa comply with international standardization when compiling indicators? Remember, South Africa is fully responsible as a member of 3 international organizations, namely the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, as well as United Nations. So it has to comply to those regulations that are set by those organizations as a member. Complying with international standardization helps the South Africa to receive funds to finance their budget and deficit from the World Bank, United Nations, as well as IMF, International Monetary Fund. Data response, economic indicators. In this case, we talk about indicators, basically economic, and then we also have social indicators. So as for the population, this social indicator, and then GDP is a part of economic indicators, and then also unemployment as a part of economic indicators, inflation rate part of economic indicators. So we have 2016, 2017, and 2018. So we check here. Let's check population growth. It increased from 2016 to 2017, and then real GDP at the constant prices in millions. In this case, it also increased. Let's see, 3,076,465, 3,119,984, 3,144. So there's an upward trend here. Real GDP per capita, as for the population, also it increased. Let's check, 55,914, 930, and then 5,595. So this one shows the decline because of the increased population. Real GDP growth, and then is 2%, 0.7, 1.5. So it was higher in 2016, declined, and increased in 2018. Unemployment rate, in this case, 2016 was 26.6%, 2017 26.1%. With the increase, 2018 it increased to 27.6%. Inflation rate, 5.3 in 2016, 4.6 in 2017, 4.4 in 2018. So it was declining. Average exchange rate, and then to US dollar 15 rand 2 cent, 15 rand 54. So in this case, our rand was losing its value. The source is South State SA as well as South African Reserve Bank quarterly bulletin. Then let's check possible questions in here. Identify the economic indicators that reflect the average earnings for each person in a country. That is the GDP per capita. And then name one international institution that requires South Africa to standardize their economic indicators. We talk about United Nations, we talk about World Bank as well as IMF or International Monetary Fund. Then we continue briefly describe the term real gross domestic product. In this case, we talk about GDP figures that have been adjusted, whereby inflation has been removed, so they are not having the effect of inflation. Total value of all final goods and services produced within the borders in the country, where changes in the price level inflation have been taken into account or has been removed. And then we continue. How is the unemployment rate determined in the country? So we use the number of unemployed people expressed as a percentage of labor force or economically active population. Number of unemployed people multiplied by 100 divided by EAP or labor force. Why is it necessary for South Africa to standardize its economic indicators according to international requirements? So the question repeats itself. It is important that the country should have the ability to compete successfully internationally and sustain improvement in real output and wealth. Remember, the country have to comply with the regulations that are set by international organizations because these assist the country to be well compared internationally. If ever the country does not comply or uses its own things or principles on determining national accounts or whatever, that will lead to the country not easily being compared with other world countries in terms of social and economic indicators. South African economy is increasingly involved in the world market through export and import, experiencing high levels of uncertainty in the global environment, which hold back higher growth. And then, why is it necessary? We continue again with the question. Various international bodies set specifications on how indicators should be compiled, which make it easy to compare figures similarly compiled. So, if ever the country is complying using the benchmark that have been set internationally, it will be easy for the country to be well compared in terms of economic and social indicators. The system of national accounts are set according to the specifications set by United Nations. South Africa can only benefit from these international organizations if indicators are readily available, e.g., bridging finance from IMF, financial development aid from the World Bank, and child aid from United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF. And then the data response. Now we go straight to the industrial development. Study the extract below and answer questions that follow. Focus on special economic zones. The special economic zone program organized from developments in national economic policies and strategies, such as National Industrial Policy Framework. The SEZ policies help to address challenges with the current industrial development zones, which formed part of the Special Development Initiatives. The Foreign Investment Grant and Critical Infrastructure Program are some of the financial incentives that promote regional development, adapted from Business Report 2019. So it is very important for you to know the following under this chapter. This chapter is all about regional development, whereby the government decide to intervene by improving economic livelihood of those underdeveloped areas by ensuring that each region can be able to stand on its own and form its own businesses so that there will be greater job opportunities and threaten apartheid economy. So here we talk about South African endovers as well as the incentive to promote industrial development. So we are talking about special economic zone here, which is mainly focused on geographical areas that have been set aside to perform the specific economic activities. So it goes in line with industrial development zone, which are purposely built industrial estates that are physical and close to seaports and airports. And then also talk straight to the special development initiatives, which are the initiatives that have been formed to develop economic livelihood of underdeveloped areas where there's a possibly high level of unemployment and poverty. So in this case, these are SA endovers in place that are forming a part of your essay. It is very important for you to know the difference between IDZ and SEZ. It is very important for you to know the benefits that are achieved by investors on IDZ and those that are investing on SEZ. it is very important also for you to know that why are SEZ known as an improvement of the ITZ. Remember, the SEZ can be located anywhere in a country, while ITZs are mainly located nearby seaports and airports. And then SEZs are having a variety of incentives that are that are given as a benefit to investors in those areas, and they also focus on both local producers and also those that are producing for the international markets. While ITZs are mainly focusing on exporting goods and services. Let's check questions. Give one example of special development initiative in South Africa. There's a long list. And in South Africa, not mentioned above. The corridor or ITZ. Which government department is responsible for industrial development in South Africa? Then there's a Department of Trade and Industry. And then briefly describe the term industrial development zone. So these are purpose-built industrial estate that are physically enclosed and linked to seaports and airports, which are mainly international because it focuses on producing goods locally that should be exported or that should be sold in foreign markets. We continue with data response. How does the foreign investment grant help promote regional industrial development? Remember, FIG, this is the incentive given by the government to FDIs or foreign direct investors that are willing to relocate to South Africa. So it is mainly given on relocation of machinery, but not equipment that will be moved from the foreign country to South Africa as they are willing to invest in the country. It's a cash incentive to assist foreign investors to cover their startup cost, which encourage establishment of business in the different regions, e.g., the cost of relocating, purchase of new machinery, as well as equipment. Why is the new Special Economic Zone program regarded as an improvement of the current industrial development zone? The SEZ involves the broader range of industrial parks and does not need to be located near a port or airport, as which the current ITZ. The SEZ involves production of export and domestic use, whereas the ITZ focus mainly on the exports. SEZ offers a special tax incentive of 15%, which is not applicable to existing ITZs. That lead to more diversified economy because it attracts variety of businesses that will be based mainly local and also producing for the foreign markets. With the data response again coming in, let's see. The BRICS, the expand footprint, BRICS expand footprint in the global market. G7 and BRICS member countries as of August 25, 2023. So G7 BRICS, new BRICS members formally joining on January 1st, 2024. Source Statista. So this is the information. Remember, I'm sure you are well informed about the changes that have occurred in BRICS as a trade agreement between world countries, which was including China, South Africa, Russia, and other countries. So now we have additional countries which now are adding up to 11 countries as members of BRICS. So those are the latest changes. So it is very important for you to note that there will no longer be 5 like before. There will be 11 now. 6 countries have been added, and their membership will be effective from the 1st of January 2024. So let's check now the possible questions in this case. Mention one of new member countries of BRICS. So we mentioned Argentina is there, Egypt is there, Ethiopia is there, United Arab Emirates is there, and then Saudi Arabia is there. When will the new countries officially have their membership active in BRICS? Then that will be January 2024. We continue. Define the term free trade areas, FTAs. So remember, FTAs consist of the agreement between 2 or more countries whereby they decide to remove imports among themselves, to remove import tariffs and quotas among themselves and allow movement of goods duty-free among themselves. However, they impose tariffs to non-member countries. Free trade area is a group of countries that have mutual agreement to limit trade barriers by not charging import tariffs among themselves. However, they do charge tariffs on non-member countries. And also, as they charge tariffs, none of the existing countries in the bloc should be charging the difference. They charge according to their agreement to say we charge so much in the non-member country. No country has the power to change the tariffs without any formal agreement between other member countries. What impact does BRICS membership has on South Africa? South Africa benefits from exporting its finished and unfinished goods and services duty free, so they won't be paying some tariffs as they export their goods. Local goods and services get exposure in international market because of BRICS, since it allows us to export goods to member countries without having to pay some tariffs. BRICS allows South Africa to expand its industrialization process and manufacturing. So South Africa will be able to improve its industrial development and growth because goods will be highly demanded in other BRICS member countries. Why is an economic union regarded as the most desirable form of economic integration? In this case, we talk about the largest, which is known as economic monetary union. Remember, in this case, that's when the integration between countries have grown to the highest level. That's when countries adopt to use the same currency, they use one central bank, and then they use same fiscal and monetary policy. So that's a part of economic monetary union, which is the largest in as a part of economic integration. Countries can adopt the same currency that can commonly be used amongst themselves. The economic monetary union is the largest form of economic integration because the same monetary policy and central bank is used amongst member countries. This form, this form of economic integration satisfies all the requirement of common market. And then another data response. In this case, now we move straight also. We're still on the same topic, but we are talking about the AGOA that is a part of the news lately, since South Africa is one of the countries that seem to be affected in this agreement, which is AGOA, due to the fact that there are suspicion that it was involved in the Ukraine-China war by sending some weapons to Ukraine-Russia war. There are suspicion that it sent some weapons to Russia. So, because now the AGOA involves America and South Africa, including other African countries, that this thing or these suspicions are leading to the situation of South Africa that it could be removed from the trade agreement of AGOA. So let's see what is being mentioned here and how do we benefit as a country from AGOA, the trade agreement. U.S. market still a valuable growth opportunity. South Africa car export to the US. So we are the main exporters of automotive or of vehicles into the US. We can see here, let's read through. The geographical fallout from Russia invasion of Ukraine is disrupting long establishment relations and making the international economic and political landscape difficult to navigate. Such disruptions could threaten the ability of South Africa manufacturers to compete globally. In particular, the possibility of exclusion from US legislated African Growth and Opportunity Act or even economic sanctions is causing consternation in many industries. So it's simply talking about what I've mentioned, that because of this thing of what you call Ukraine-Russia war, South Africa is likely, or there are possibilities that it can be sanctioned or be removed from this trade agreement between US and other world countries, and that will be discouraging, or it will let down local industries, especially in the manufacturing sector, because their export won't be growing at the highest volume like they were doing when the country was involved or is involved in a AGOA trade agreement. The country is the main exporter of motor vehicles to the US market. And then let's look at questions. Identify the trade agreement that involves South Africa, USA, and other African countries. So in this case, we talk about AGOA, which is African Growth Opportunity Act. Mention the product that is mostly exported by South Africa through AGOA trade agreement, vehicles. Define the term economic integration. Economic integration is an arrangement amongst countries to eliminate trade barriers and coordinate monetary and fiscal policies. How does the AGOA trade agreement negatively affect South African economy? South Africa receives cheap imports such as frozen chicken from US market, which has resulted to the struggle of local poultry industry. We know that we are receiving imports of frozen chicken from US market, which is relatively cheap, and that has resulted to the decline of our local poultry industry because our local frozen chicken is relatively expensive compared to the imported cheap chickens or frozen chicken from US market. Local consumers demand cheap imports at the expense of locally produced goods and services. As imports from US are very cheap because of the trade agreement, and then local consumers are not mainly demanding locally produced goods and services in this fashion, but they substitute them by demanding the imported goods that are relatively cheap, which compromises our local economy and local industries. Why is it necessary for South Africa to maintain its membership on the AGOA trade agreement? South African exporters are relieved from paying tariffs because of AGOA. Remember, this trade agreement allows our exporting businesses not to pay what we call the tariff as they export their goods and services. They are duty free. And then a high volume of exported vehicles and large revenues for the country or for South Africa. So as we export these goods and including vehicles, there are more revenues or higher revenues that are earned by this business. So if ever we can lose our membership, this will be the fallout. Local consumers benefit from the most affordable imports, which improve their standard of living. And then the data response. Let's check what is being mentioned in here. We have on this side the campaign funds. You see that the man on the side is sitting on top of the large amount of money in bags in here, and then the other man on the side, this man, and then is complaining if only there was a way to spread the wealth. So that simply means some people are having less, some are having more. Some countries are developed, some are developing. There is this thing of the north, the south, the divide, which is known as the development continuum gap. So let's look at questions. Mention an alternation concept for north-south divide. It's a development continuum gap. It is also known as a north-south divide. Why? What is portrayed, depicted in the cartoon above? Economic inequalities, more wealth in the position of the few, meaning more people are holding on more wealth, while more people, few people are holding on more wealth and more people are holding on less wealth. They are economic inequalities that are normally described through your Lorentz curve. Define the term north-south divide. North-south divide refers to the economic division or stratification between developed and developing nations. Remember, we say developing countries are the part of the south divide. They are found in the southern hemisphere. Developed countries are the part of the north divide. They are found in the northern hemisphere. However, it is possible to discover developed countries from the southern hemisphere. What causes developing countries to have less benefit from the free trade? Meaning, why are developing countries having less benefit? Remember, developing countries are mainly dependent on natural resources and primary sector resources. For that sake, they won't benefit the most because their primary sector is having the strategic, the primary sector resources such as natural resources are having strategic value. They are sold at the lower cost as natural resources, and they are imported back at the higher cost as finished goods. So there's a part of the manipulation that occurs in here. Developing countries are the main exporters of natural resources which are not value added. They have less value. High volume of subsidized imports are cheap, which decreases the demand for local products. So some goods that are imported, even natural resources, those goods are highly subsidized by their governments from foreign countries, for which our locally goods are not subsidized. So in that case, our countries are not standing to benefit the most because they don't subsidize their goods into the global market, especially in the primary sector, while the foreign or developed countries are subsidizing their primary sector resources to protect them from the developing countries. Why is poverty seen as one of major challenges for countries in Southern Hemisphere or developing countries? Southern countries are characterized by relatively low per capita income, so there's a lower income which leads to people having less income available, and that result to them living beyond the poverty line or below poverty line, which is an absolute poverty. The population growth rate increased faster than economic growth, resulting to less capabilities to create opportunities for all. Remember, if ever the population growth is increasing faster than economic growth, the economy cannot be able to create enough opportunities for everyone because the population increases more than the economy. That will always lead lead to poverty remaining as a constraint in developing countries. Dependence on primary sector results to less job opportunities and high unemployment. Remember, primary sector resources, some of them are in danger of being completed or of extinction. For that sake, if they can be completed, that will lead to less job opportunities. And also, as these primary sector resources are extracted, they are extracted in a sustainable manner, resulting to less consumption on them and also less exploitation on those resources, resulting to less opportunities being created because our firms are not well industrialized, our firms are still in firms. They can employ less capacity of unemployed people. Industries in southern countries are in firms. They have less capacity to create job opportunities. Data response again. So let's see what we have here on this data response. We have the poverty, we have corruption, load shedding, we have unemployment, and then heavy load. So these are the challenges that are too much for the country as South Africa source the citizen. So let's look at questions. Mention the social indicator represented by the load shedding. Remember, services. If ever there is an electric supply, it's a part of services under social indicators. Identify the counter-cyclic economic indicator from the above cartoon. Remember, we have two types of economic indicators, namely counter-cyclic and pro-cyclic. Counter-cyclic are not in proportion to the economic performance. Pro-cyclic are in proportion to the economic performance. So let's check. Unemployment, remember, as unemployment increases, economic growth declines, so it is not in proportion, hence we call it a counter-cyclic economic indicator. Define the term economic indicators. So the economic indicators are variables that reflect economic performance or economic welfare. And then we continue with the data response. Why is it important for the government to know population growth rate? This was dealt with in the public sector under that topic, public sector provisioning. So it's coming back again here. It is very important for the government to know the size of population growth of the country so that it can be able to budget, to do its budget concerning the population size of the particular geographical area. For the government to know this information, it is also necessary because the government should provide public goods and services that are, accordingly, to avoid the undersupply and oversupply if the government is well informed about the growth in population in a country. But if the government is not well informed about the population size in the particular country, there will be undersupply of goods and services or oversupply at some stage. Knowing population growth rate is important for the government because population figures are used to provide public goods and services in communities. How does poor rural development cause urban social instabilities? So if ever there's a high level of urbanization or if ever there's a lower development in rural areas, people from rural areas will be moving to urban areas, which is known as urbanization, resulting to more demand for basic needs, which cannot be offered in urban areas, resulting to high level of informal settlement. And then poor rural development limits economic opportunities and promote urbanization. The influx of people in urban areas increase population and increase urban unemployment. Urbanization increased the demand for basic services such as water, housing, and electricity in big cities, while the government cannot afford to provide those services in those big cities because there is a budget constraint. How can the increase in the personal income tax affect the aggregate demand? So now we are talking about if ever there's high tax imposed on employed people, how will that affect the demand? We know that it always affects disposable income. As income tax increases, there will be a decrease in disposable income and also resulting to the decrease in aggregate demand for goods and services. What will be the effect of aggregate demand? If aggregate demand increases faster than aggregate supply. So if demand is more than the supply, what happens? If aggregate demand increases faster than the aggregate supply, prices will increase, causing the inflation, which is known as the demand pull inflation. How does increased government spending affect aggregate demand? As the government spending increases in the economy, that will lead to more money flowing into the economy and also more job opportunities, because if ever the government increases spending, it improves infrastructure development, resulting to people being employed and earning more income. Then they will be demanding more goods and services. So increased government spending create employment opportunities which earn people income. This results to increase in aggregate demand in the economy. 8 marks questions now. Why should the government focus on SMMEs to drive the economy? Why should the government support SMMEs or small, micro, and medium enterprises to drive the economy? So let's look at possible answers. The small businesses sector employs the large part of labor force compared to other sides of businesses. The average capital cost of job created in the SMME sector is lower than the big business sector. It allows for more competitive markets where consumers will benefit from wide variety of goods and services at more competitive or lower prices. It can adapt more rapidly than larger organizations to changing preferences and trends, because remember, small businesses are very close to communities. So it will be easy for them to change according to the social needs as compared to the bigger business that are having bigger mandate. They don't normally change. They focus on their own planning. And then often local resources are used, which has a ripple effect on development of other industries. So, and on the small businesses or SMMEs, local resources will be used to function and to produce goods and services that will be benefiting and ensuring the development of local industries. It provides opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially those who are unemployed, underemployed, or retrenched. Workers at the smaller end, at the smaller end of the scale, often require limited or no skill or training they learn on the job. So on SMMEs, workers do not mainly need much of the skill they learn from the job, which allows for greater job creation on the skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled labor. Subcontracting by large enterprises to SMMEs lends expansion to production process. If ever the small business get to have contracts with larger businesses. And then it plays a vital role on technical and other innovation, which can lead to a world of successful, highly qualified competitors in future. So this business can be able to grow faster and be a part of our multinational industries as they are well supported. Briefly discuss foreign trade as an economic indicator. Foreign trade can be described as exchange of goods and services between two or more countries. Foreign trade indicators measure the country's competitiveness in the foreign or international markets. So it includes for exchange rate, terms of trade, also BOP. So let's see exchange rate. So we define can be defined as the value of one country in relation to another country's currency, and then exchange rate means the price at which different currencies can be exchanged. And then two methods are used when calculating exchange rate, namely direct and the indirect methods, or direct or indirect approach. And then we continue. Changes in the exchange rate affect the prices that are paid for imports and the price that are earned by export. We know that if ever the currency can appreciate, that will mean we will have more earnings on our export, while earnings on import will be lower. When the rand depreciates, export become cheaper, which increases the foreign demand. Imports become expensive, which decrease the local demand on imported goods and services. And then we continue. When the rand depreciates, export become expensive, which increases. When the rand depreciates, appreciates, export become expensive, which decreases the foreign demand. Import become cheap, which increase local demand. So whenever our rand is appreciating, our export will be cheap. There will be less demand. Imports will be, our exports will be expensive, lowering the demand from foreign markets. And then imports will be cheap, increasing the demand, meaning our local consumers will compromise and demand more imported goods and services because they are relatively cheap. Exchange rate is a very important foreign trade indicator as it influences the inflow of imports and outflow of exports. Appreciated exchange rate weakens the country's balance of payments, while depreciated exchange strengthens the country's balance of payments. So how? If our currency becomes strong, remember our export becomes expensive. As our export becomes expensive, there will be less demand for export, resulting to less outflow of goods as export into the global markets. And then if our currency becomes weak, that will lead to more demand for import and for exports because they become relatively cheap, increasing the trade balance, meaning reducing the trade deficit in the BOP in there. And then we continue with the foreign trade. In terms of trade, remember, terms of trade is the index or the ratio of export prices to the ratio or index of import prices. Changes in export and import prices has an influence in terms of trade. So the increase in export prices has a temporary increasing effect on terms of trade because the demand for export likely to decrease in the long run. So that's why we say it is temporary. Changes in terms of trade may spill over to the balance of payments. If terms of trade decreases, it may cause the deficit. Evaluate the effectiveness of GEAR as a growth policy. Since it was formed in 1996 in South Africa, 8 months. How effective? Remember, in this kind of the question, you look at the success and the failure. So we check how effective GEAR has been in South Africa, and then also we check the success and the failure in this case. GEAR was successful on achieving price stability through inflation targeting of between 3 to 6%. Remember, as in now, we ensure, or Reserve Bank ensure that inflation does not go beyond 6%. If there is that case, it intervenes by ensuring that it combats inflation. It achieved greater financial discipline and reduced budget deficit. And then the government introduced various economic redistribution measures to try and reduce economic inequalities. Since the introduction of GEAR, functionality of export promotion policy was evident, and the trade deficit on the current account and and balance of payments was slightly reduced. That's a success part. And then we check the failures now. The economic freedom of most South Africans has not been achieved. Income gaps and economic inequalities still exist. We know that South Africa is one of the countries with highest economic inequalities in the world. Exchange rate instability remains as a major challenge or concern, which makes South Africa foreign trade more vulnerable. South African financial discipline shows inconsistency since state debts are roaming around 60% of the main budget. Remember, the benchmark is that it should not be above 60%. South African economic growth has been below 6% since 1996. And then unemployment remains as a critical challenge in South Africa, which has resulted to high level of social and economic instability in the country. And then evaluate ASGIS as a growth policy in South Africa. It is very important for you to know objectives of the policy before evaluating, because you can't evaluate effective without knowing the objectives. So South Africa has achieved a better infrastructural development to open opportunities for local and foreign investments. Labor-intensive job opportunities slightly increase in targeted industries to accommodate less skilled labor force. And then we continue. The failures now. ASGIS failed to have unemployment from 28% to 14% by 2014. Remember, it was the main of the objectives. It failed to meet its economic objective of achieving at least 6% of economic growth by 2014. The aim was to achieve at least 6% economic growth by 2014, but it could not achieve such. So that's why we call it a part of failures. Inequalities and poverty has increased in South Africa over the past years. We have seen it increasing rapidly. Youth unemployment remains as a major concern, which continues to cause social instability. How can the free trade policy affect emerging economies? Remember, if we talk about emerging economies, we talk about developing countries. So it goes back to the question once had before. Free trade policy opens opportunities for infant businesses to expand without limitations in the foreign markets. Remember, foreign markets are bigger than local markets, so they get a chance to expand and grow. Free trade promotes efficient use of economic resources to infant industries as they produce for local and foreign markets. So they will be using their resources efficiently because as they are producing for both local markets and foreign markets. And then high competitions caused by the free trade improve the level of creativeness and innovation as infant industries compete in a wider market scope. So they will be very much innovative and creative because as they compete, they're competing with a variety of businesses from different world countries. Free trade policy can result to businesses from developing countries accessing capital easily to support their production process, because now capital might be cheap due to the fact that as they import capital, there are no import restrictions or tariffs that are imposed. We continue. Negative effect. Developing countries are dominated by infant industries, which has less productive capacity. They lack capital to produce for both the local and foreign markets. Industries from emerging economies has less to offer in international markets as compared to those that are industrialized. Free trade policy have an effect of shutting down local market because competition can be too high and unfair for local businesses, since foreign companies might be having advantage of economies of scale while local businesses are faced by the diseconomies of scale. The problem of dumping can arise, resulting to local consumers demanding most of cheap products from foreign countries and compromising the locally produced goods and services. Evaluate South Africa's import substitution policy, 10 marks. increase in industrial growth and employment as new industry will be established. So if ever there's import substitution, there will be establishment of new industry to produce goods that were former imports. Increase in profit leading to further investment. As local businesses are gaining more profits, there will be even further investment in South African economy, resulting to expansion of local industries. Tariff introduced in South Africa can lead to increasing demand for locally manufactured goods and services. If tariffs are introduced in imported goods, they will be expensive, resulting to local consumers demanding most of the locally produced goods and services. Import substitution improve industrialization, which increase employment opportunities. We know that if ever import substitution is in place, there will be greater job creation locally, because consumers will mainly be demanding locally produced goods, and since imports will be expensive or will be less. A decrease in imports has a positive effect on the balance of payment as more export. As there are more exports than imports, or imports will be exports will be increasing more than imports because of the import substitution policy. Only if there is no retaliation. Remember. And then we continue. Import substitution is restrictive as the choice of goods and services available to consumers may be limited. So it does not benefit consumers, because now consumers will be having less choices since imports will be restricted from entering the country. It is not easy to implement the policy of import substitution due to unrecorded or informal illegal transactions that takes place. It does not necessarily lead to an overall reduction of imports. South Africa has to import capital and intermediate goods to manufacture consumer goods. Inefficient local production may occur because local producers are shielded from international competition. And then this is the essay structure as a part of section C. Remember, you have your introduction where you define the concept relevant to the essay, and then we continue. And then we have the body as the main part, where we have 26 marks. And then in there, remember, we have 8 to 18 principle, whereby 8 is for lower order, where you list or mention the headings, including examples, as well as the 18 part is for the discussion of the content. 10 marks is a part of the editorial part, where you will be given another question related to the main topic, and you answer it for 10 marks. Remember, it is very important for you to answer this one in the point form, but in full sentences, minimum of 5 points. That might give you 10 marks, and then you can give even more than 5 points. And then essay structure conclusion. Remember, this is the higher order response, whereby you need to critically or evaluate, conclude based on the main part or additional part. It consists of 2 marks. Total is 40 marks. Remember, the following are the essay principles. Arrange your essay in subheadings, not in paragraphs. Use point form rather than paragraph when writing your essay. Remember the IMAC, which is introduction, main part, additional part, as well as a conclusion, the IMAX structure, so that you will always follow the structure as write your essay. Remember, 18 to 18 principle, whereby main part is the in the main part, whereby you have subheadings for 8 marks as well as 18 marks for the pure discussion. And then we continue with the principle that you should follow. Be aware that listing on the additional part has the maximum of 2 marks. So if you list, you will get only 2 marks and you will lose 8 marks. Ensure that you discuss in full sentences. Ensure that responses you provide are enough to score maximum marks. And then arrange your essay in point form. Like I've said before, your conclusion should not have any repetition of either the introduction, main part, or original part, but then should be a critical part of response. That is the higher order response. Essay conclusion must be higher order response. And then these are the essays for paper 1. Basically, under macroeconomics, we have the essay under the first topic, circular flow, discussing detail markets within the 4-sector model. And then those are your markets in the macroeconomics. Discussing detail the new economic paradigm, explaining smoothing business cycle. That's why you talk about demand side and supply side policies under the business cycle on economic paradigm. Discussing detail features underpinning forecasting. That's why you talk about your leading, lagging, coincidence, and composite indicators. Going further with extrapolation, moving averages, the trend line, the length, etc. Discussing detailed main objective for the public sector in the economy. That's why we talk about economic growth, full employment, price stability, exchange rate stability, as well as what we call economic equity. Discussing detailed reasons for public sector failure, link them to the poor public sector provision. In this case, that's why we talk about lack of motivation, we talk about apathy, talk about structural weaknesses, etc. Discussing detailed reasons for international trade, that's why we talk about both demand and supply reasons for the foreign trade. And then under economic pursuit, we talk about discussing detailed export promotion. So in this case, we refer to methods of export promotion. We talk to subsidies and incentives. And then also we talk about maybe it can be advantages as well as disadvantages, also including reasons for the export promotion. Discussing detailed arguments in favor of protectionism. This will be covered here in this lesson. Discussing detailed demand side approach to promoting economic growth and development in South Africa. That's why we talk about the fiscal policy, the monetary policy, and then we talk about land reform, which talks to land restitution and land redistribution. We talk about the capital gains tax, etc., and other redistribution methods. And then discuss in detail South Africa economic growth and development policies. That's why you talk about your RDP, GIA, ASGISA, GIPSA, Triple B, EOBE, NDP, NGP, EPWP, NSDS, small business support program, etc. Discussing detailed economic indicators. So in this case, we refer to the likes of demographics, services, housing and urbanization, education indicators, health indicators, etc. Discussing detailed economic indicators now. So these were social indicators, economic indicators. In this case, we refer to inflation indicators, foreign trade indicators, demand supply indicators, interest rate indicators, productivity indicators. And then this is the example of an essay under protectionism and free trade, discussing detail argument in favor of protectionism. 26 months. How can South Africa benefit from trading in the global markets for 10 months? So the first thing is the definition. The trade policy whereby the state implements measures to protect local industries against the foreign unfair competition. So if we talk of protectionism, the government imposed some restrictive measures to prevent the entry of those goods and services to protect locally industry to produce more goods and services. Remember, if ever foreign investors are bringing goods, foreign business are bringing goods in South African economy, meaning imports, that will be leading to local consumers not demanding the locally produced goods, but demanding the import. So in that case, the state intervened by protecting our local firms against the foreign unfair competition. Why we say the competition is unfair? It is unfair because these foreign businesses are bringing goods that are subsidized, meaning they are sold locally at the lowest possible cost. So they also produce at the economies of scale, while we produce at the economies of scale, which is the disadvantage to our local business. That's why we say competition is unfair. Industrial development. So some developing countries are suitable for establishing certain kinds of industries. Free trade makes it impossible to compete with well-established older countries due to the first few years of existence of an industry being most difficult. Older industries use unfair methods of price cutting and dumping. Therefore, young industries need protection until properly established. Protection will prevent competition because it is difficult to do away with once applied. And then infant industries. These are industries that are still very much weak. They are not well established or industrialized. It is difficult for young industry to survive due to average cost being higher than well-established industries or competitors. We know that foreign industries are producing at the lowest average cost compared to well-established industries. So established industries are producing at the lowest, while infant industries are producing at the highest average cost. If they are given protection in their early years, they can grow and take advantage of economies of scale. Stable wage level and high standard of living. A country with high wage has a view that standard of living will be undermined or compromised if cheap goods are imported from other countries. In reality, high wages are paid to workers with high productivity. Increased employment. If local industries cannot find profitable markets, they may stop production and cause unemployment. Production will result to less unemployment. If local firms are protected, they will be employing more workers, which will be reducing unemployment. Economic self-sufficiency and strategic key industries. War causes cut off or friction between countries, depression, shift in in demand, and all factors that are vital to be self-supporting. Protection is granted especially to key industries to ensure their survival, because if they are not protected, they might find themselves out of the market. Maintain domestic employment to reduce unemployment and provide more job opportunities. Countries with high level of unemployment are pressured to stimulate employment creation. Protectionism policies are used to stimulate industrialization. Domestic employment is encouraged through imposing import restrictions. Domestic employment creation at the expense of other countries is known as the beggar thy neighbor policies. Preventing dumping. Countries selling goods in a foreign country at the lower price than cost of production in home country. Dumping is used to capture new markets and forces financially weaker industries out of the market. Foreign enterprises may engage in dumping because government subsidies permit them to sell goods at the very low cost in the foreign country than in the country of origin, which will be forcing out our local industries of the market. Preventing dumping continues. The initial reason for exporting products at the lower price may be to dispose of accumulated stocks of goods. So if there's more stock of goods in the country, we sell that stock at the lowest possible cost abroad, which is a part of dumping. In short term, consumers in the importing country will benefit because they will be having variety of these goods at the lower cost, improving their standard of living and welfare. However, their long-term objective may be to derive out of domestic producers and gain strong market position. In this case, consumers are likely to lose out as a result of a reduction in choice and higher prices that the exporters will be able to charge. Protectionism prevents foreign industries from dumping their supplies of goods and services into the local economy, which will be allowing our local producers to produce more goods and sell in the local market. Stabilizing exchange rate and balance of payment. Traders buy on cheapest markets and sell most on expensive ones. Countries export primary products and import manufactured goods, causing a disrupted balance of payments and exchange rate. Prices of imports increase through tariffs and quotas. A stable exchange rate and BOP increases government revenues, prevents harmful goods from entering the country, develop greater technical skills. Protection of natural resources. Free trade will exhaust resources or natural resources because of wealth shares. Protection ensure that that industries will survive and resources will be protected, ensuring greater economic stability. Over specialization is a result of free trade and is harmful in times of war and friction because there will be high level of dependency. Protection prevents over specialization, thereby creating more differentiated economy, meaning there will be a diversified economy in a country because the country is able to create or to produce variety of goods and services, which will be causing the greater stability in the economy. It also promotes secondary industries and the welfare of people dependent on protected industries. So secondary sector will be protected and promoted because local firms will be encouraged now to produce more goods and services, which will be promoting the secondary sector, manufacturing sector. Ensures the greater economic stability. Continues. If imports are greater than exports, a country may introduce import controls such as custom duty and quotas to eliminate deficits on the balance of payment. Developing countries rely on export of primary products. Selling processed goods is more beneficial to a country as more foreign exchange can be earned. Remember, developing countries are mostly selling less value-added goods because they are not well transformed to final goods. Production ensures the processing of primary goods until completion, then they can be exported. Any other response that is relevant and correct will be accepted for 26 marks. Additional part. South Africa will benefit from global market through the following. Production of goods and services will increase as local business will sell their product at the larger market. We know that if ever we are participating in the global market, we will produce more goods and services to sell them in the global market, earning us the more foreign currency and improving our GDP. Quality of goods and services will improve as businesses try to match the world standards. So there will be high level of creativeness and innovation, resulting to goods being at the highest quality. Competition from foreign products will encourage local business to be more innovative. Efficiency in the production of goods and services will improve, resulting in business charging lower possible prices. South African consumers will have more choice on goods and services as they will access the foreign products. And then more job opportunities may be created as the production of goods and services increases. Inflation may be controlled as local prices will be linked to international prices. South Africa will increase its trade relations with other world countries, which will result to it gaining larger market share internationally. And then the country will be earning the foreign currency, which will strengthen the domestic currency. South Africa will specialize in the production of goods which they have competitive advantage. Local consumers will get international exposure, resulting to local business being very much competitive abroad. Any other correct relevant response is accepted for the maximum of 10 marks. And then conclusion. The policy of restriction of internal trade or protectionism will, with the aim of preventing unemployment or capital losses in industries threatened by imports, might not affect the internal distribution of income sufficiently or improve the country's terms of trade, because it is not based on international monopoly power and expert knowledge. So any other relevant response that is at the higher order level may be accepted for 2 marks. Then this is summing up to 40 marks. And then our lesson ends here. I thank you, and I believe this lesson will assist you as you prepare for your paper 1, and will also improve your capability in economic pursuit as one of those topics that I believe to be very hard and difficult for you in your question 1, question 3, and question 6. I thank you.